The day Earth joined the galactic community started like any other for Jack Collins. He woke up, brushed his teeth, and had his morning coffee. The only difference was that today he would meet aliens for the first time. Jack adjusted his blue uniform and looked at his reflection in the mirror. At 42 years old, with graying hair at his temples and lines around his eyes, he had spent most of his life in the military before joining the newly formed Earth Diplomatic Corps. Now, he stood as humanity's representative to the stars. "Are you ready for this?" Samantha Wright asked, entering the preparation room. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her uniform matched his own. "Ready as I'll ever be," Jack replied with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes.
"Still can't believe they picked us. Who better than a soldier and a linguist?" Samantha said.
At 35, she had mastered 12 Earth languages before the alien transmission arrived 6 months ago. Since then, she had worked day and night to understand the basics of the Council's common speech. A soft chime sounded throughout the room. "They're here," Jack said. The meeting would take place in a special dome built just for this occasion. World leaders had agreed that the first contact should happen in neutral territory, an open field in Switzerland, far from major cities, but close enough to Geneva for diplomatic convenience. Jack and Samantha walked side by side toward the dome. Through the clear walls, they could see the alien ship that had landed. It looked like a giant teardrop made of some shimmering material that changed colors in the sunlight. "Remember," Jack said quietly, "we follow protocol exactly as planned. No sudden movements, maintain eye contact when culturally appropriate, and most importantly, no weapons," Samantha finished, though I still don't understand why they were so specific about that part. The doors slid open with a gentle hiss. Inside the dome waited 12 creatures so different from one another that Jack had to remind himself they all belonged to the same political entity, the Galactic Council. Some stood on multiple legs. Others floated using technology Jack couldn't begin to understand. One appeared to be made entirely of shifting crystals. But they all had one thing in common. Each carried what was clearly a weapon of some kind. A tall reptilian creature stepped forward. Its scales shimmered between green and blue, and a ridge of spines ran from the top of its head down its back. It carried something that looked like a staff but with glowing parts that hummed with energy. "I am Zexa Tavrok, Chief of Security for this delegation," the creature said in a voice that sounded like stones grinding together. "Before we proceed, you must be scanned." Without waiting for permission, 3 smaller beings moved forward with devices that beeped and flashed as they circled Jack and Samantha. "This is unusual," one of the scanner operators said. "They appear to be completely unarmed." Zex Tavrok's vertical pupils narrowed. "Impossible. Scan again." The process repeated. Jack stood perfectly still, remembering his briefing. "First impressions matter." "Nothing," the operator confirmed. "No energy weapons, no projectile devices, no hidden blades." A murmur rippled through the alien delegation. A being that appeared to be made of flowing liquid inside a containment suit bubbled rapidly, which Samantha recognized as their form of speech. "Ambassador Fluva asks if this is some form of deception," Zex Tavrok translated. "All species carry protection when meeting unknown entities. It is biological imperative." Jack stepped forward, careful to move slowly. "We come without weapons as a sign of trust and peaceful intentions. This is diplomatic custom for humans when seeking friendly relations." Another round of murmurs spread through the delegation. A small avian creature with brilliant red feathers chittered something that made half the aliens step back. "Counselor, Pigtak suggests you must be the most dangerous predators in the galaxy to walk so confidently unarmed," Zex Tavrok said. The security chief's hand tightened on his staff. "Or the most foolish." Samantha joined Jack, her diplomatic training kicking in. Neither honored counselors. Humans simply believe that first meetings should begin with trust rather than suspicion. Large being covered in thick fur grunted. When it spoke, the translator converted its speech to a deep, rumbling voice. "Trust is earned over centuries between species. You expect it in minutes?" "We hope to start the process," Jack replied. Every relationship has to begin somewhere. The aliens conferred among themselves, speaking in languages that made Jack's ears hurt. Finally, Zex's Tavrok turned back to the humans. "We will proceed with the diplomatic exchange," the security chief said. "But be warned, our weapons remain ready. This is not a judgment against your species, but standard procedure established over thousands of years of interstellar relations." Jack nodded. "We understand and take no offense." The group moved toward the central table that had been prepared with various atmospheric settings to accommodate all the species present. As they walked, Zexa Tavrok fell into step beside Jack. "In private," the alien said quietly, "I must ask, how does a species evolve without natural weapons? No claws, no significant teeth, no venom glands. Even your skin is remarkably thin and vulnerable." Jack considered his answer carefully. "We adapted differently. We learned to use our minds, to create tools rather than evolving physical weapons. Tools you have now chosen not to bring," Zex Tavrok noted. Curious. The meeting lasted for hours. Star charts were exchanged, basic cultural information shared, and preliminary trade possibilities discussed. Throughout it all, the aliens kept their weapons visible, while Jack and Samantha sat with empty hands folded on the table. As the meeting concluded, the liquid-filled ambassador Fluva approached them. Up close, Jack could see tiny structures floating within the being's transparent body. "Your approach is unusual," Fluva said through the translator. "In the 12,000 standard years since the Council's formation, no new species has ever attended first contact without display of strength." "Sometimes the strongest choice is to show vulnerability," Samantha replied. This concept seemed to confuse the ambassador, whose liquid body swirled in rapid patterns. As the aliens prepared to leave, Zex's Tavrok performed one final scan of the humans. The security chief's facial scales flattened in what Jack would later learn was an expression of deep puzzlement. "You will be invited to the council station within one orbital cycle," Zex's Tavrok announced. "Our superiors are curious about humans." After the alien ship departed, lifting silently into the clouds, Jack let out a long breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Well," Samantha said with a small smile, "that went better than expected." Jack looked at the empty sky. "Did it? They think we're either dangerous predators or complete fools." "Maybe," Samantha replied, "but they're talking about us. And in diplomacy, keeping the conversation going is the first victory." Jack nodded, slowly. The real work was just beginning. Somehow they needed to help aliens understand humanity, a species that had fought countless wars against itself, yet chose to meet strangers from the stars with open, empty hands. 3 weeks after first contact, Amy Bennett found herself aboard the massive council station orbiting a neutral star system. The science officer had been selected to join the human delegation because of her background in evolutionary biology and anthropology. Her task was simple but critical: help aliens understand humans. Amy stood at the viewing window in her quarters watching stars drift by. The station was enormous, like a metal city floating in space. Dozens of different alien ships docked along, its many arms. She still couldn't believe she was here. A chime sounded at her door. When it slid open, a being that looked like a tall, praying mantis stood in the hallway. Its green exoskeleton gleamed under the lights, and its compound eyes reflected Amy's face back at her in multiple tiny versions. "Science Officer Bennett?" the alien said through a translator device. "I am Vrel Knox, head xenobiologist for the Council. I have been assigned to work with you on the human paradox study." Amy smiled. "The human paradox?" "Yes. Your species has become somewhat of a puzzle to us," Vrel Knox said, mandibles clicking. "May I enter?" Amy stepped aside. "Of course, would you like to sit?" Vrel Knox folded its long limbs awkwardly onto a chair designed for humans. Amy noticed the alien carried what looked like a ceremonial dagger on its belt. "I hope you don't mind." "My asking," Amy said. "But is that weapon necessary for our meeting?" The mantis-like alien's antennae twitched. "It is not a choice. My species' ceremonial blade is as much a part of our formal attire as your uniform is to you. All council species carry some form of defense. It is natural. Just as it's natural for us not to, Amy replied. Vrel Knox removed a tablet-like device from a pouch. That is precisely what we aim to understand. It defies evolutionary logic. All intelligent species we have encountered evolved from predators, prey, or both. All retain defensive mechanisms. Amy sat across from her new colleague. Humans evolved as persistence hunters. We didn't need claws or venom. We had endurance and intelligence. Yet you created weapons, Vrel Knox noted. Some of the most devastating weapons in your history. Our research teams have studied your wars. Amy nodded. True. But we also created art, music, medicine. Tools can build or destroy. The choice matters more than the tool. For the next several hours, they discussed human evolution, culture, and psychology. Amy explained how humans had developed complex social structures based on cooperation rather than just strength. Vrel Knox seemed particularly confused by concepts like trust and faith. You trust based on feeling? The alien asked. Sometimes, Amy replied, but also based on shared values, past actions, mutual benefit. Trust is complicated. At the same time, in another part of the station, Frank Garcia was experiencing a different aspect of alien culture. As the security liaison for the human delegation, he had been invited to observe council security procedures. What he didn't expect was to become the subject of those procedures. Frank stood in a large training area surrounded by 6 different alien security officers. Each represented a different species within the council. Each was armed with what Frank assumed were non-lethal training weapons. The exercise is simple, explained Crovage, the gruff, furry head of council security. You will attempt to reach the other side of this room. Frank looked at the distance, about 30 meters of open space. Just walk across? Crovage made a sound like a bark. If you can, my officers will stop you using standard containment protocols. This will help us understand human defensive capabilities. Frank realized this was a test. And if I refuse? Then we learn humans avoid direct challenges, Crovage replied. Data is data. Frank removed his jacket and handed it to an aide. All right, but I'm unarmed, as required by your protocols for humans in the station. Crovage's furry face formed what might have been a smile. We are aware. Frank took a deep breath and began walking. He made it 3 steps before the first attack came, a quick move from a reptilian officer. Frank sidestepped, using the alien's momentum against it. The second came from behind, some kind of sticky net fired from a device. Frank rolled under. For nearly 10 minutes, Frank used every bit of his military training to evade capture. He never struck back, only redirected, dodged, and maneuvered. When he finally reached the far wall, touching it with his palm, the room fell silent. Fascinating, Crovage said finally. You never once attempted to disarm my officers or use their weapons against them. Frank was breathing hard. That wasn't the objective. You asked me to cross the room, not to fight. But you could have, Crovage pressed. You had at least 7 opportunities to take weapons from my officers. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should, Frank replied. Back in the science division, Amy was showing Vrel Knox historical footage of human cooperation, barn raisings, disaster rescues, community projects. Your species will risk personal safety for others, Vrel Knox observed. Even strangers. Often, yes, Amy confirmed. Even more puzzling is that you do this without clear benefit to genetic continuity, Vrel Knox continued. Our species help relatives, those who share our genetics. You help anyone. Amy thought about this. We evolved in groups. Helping the group helped everyone survive. But modern humans help those outside their groups, Vrel Knox countered, even members of entirely different species. Like when your delegation insisted on unarmed meetings to make us comfortable, despite potential risk to yourselves, Amy smiled. That's the paradox of humans. We're capable of terrible violence, but also remarkable compassion, sometimes within the same person. That evening, The human delegation gathered to share their experiences. Jack Collins listened as Amy and Frank reported their findings. They're studying us as much as we're studying them, Jack mused. Maybe more. Samantha entered the room looking concerned. I've been monitoring council communications. There's a faction that considers humans dangerous specifically because we don't display weapons. They think we're hiding something. Jack nodded slowly. In a way, they're right. Our greatest weapons have always been our minds and our ability to work together. He looked around at his team. Keep doing what you're doing. Show them humans at our best. Cooperative, creative, peaceful. And, if they push us, Frank asked, then we adapt, Jack said simply. It's what humans do best. Outside their window, the massive structure of the council station continued its slow rotation against the backdrop of stars. Somewhere in those many hallways, decisions were being made about humanity's place in the galactic community. Decisions based on a simple question. What kind of species comes in peace yet has the confidence to walk unarmed among predators? 2 months after humans joined the Galactic Council as observers, Earth hosted its first major alien delegation. The event was named the Geneva Summit, as representatives from 12 council species gathered in the Swiss city to establish formal, diplomatic ties. Security Chief Eric Rodriguez stood at attention near the main entrance of the newly constructed Galactic Embassy. At 38, Eric had served in the military for 15 years before joining the diplomatic security force. His dark eyes constantly scanned the crowd, looking for anything unusual. Nervous? Asked Ambassador Nicole Carter as she joined him at his post. Her formal blue suit marked her as Earth's chief diplomat. Cautious, Eric replied. First time so many council species visit Earth at once. We have protocols, but every species has different customs, biology, and potential threats, Nicole finished for him. I know. The council security team reminded me several times that they need to carry their ceremonial weapons. Eric frowned. Still don't like Frit, but orders are orders. The council had insisted their representatives maintain their traditional armaments during the summit. After much debate, Earth's governments had agreed with strict limitations. The compromise had taken weeks to negotiate. The first delegates began to arrive. Eric watched as Zex Tavrok, the reptilian security chief he had heard about from Jack Collins, entered with a group of officials. As promised, they carried only ceremonial weapons, ornate but still functional. Ambassador Carter, Zex Tavrok greeted with a formal bow. Your planet is very blue and wet. Nicole smiled. Thank you for noticing. Water covers most of our surface. Explains much about human evolution, the reptilian replied, eyes darting around the room. No natural defenses in an aquatic environment. Before Nicole could respond, a commotion erupted at the entrance. A delegation of insectoid aliens, the XK3, arrived in what appeared to be a state of agitation. Their translator devices emitted sharp clicking sounds. What's happening? Eric asked, moving closer to Nicole. An aide rushed over. Sir, the XK3 delegation is demanding additional security measures. They're claiming they received threats. Eric exchanged glances with Nicole. No threats were made. We've monitored all communications. It may be a cultural misunderstanding, Nicole suggested. Whatever the cause, the situation escalated quickly. The XK3 representatives began clicking their mandibles loudly. One raised what appeared to be a ceremonial staff, its tip glowing. With energy. Weapon active, Eric shouted, moving toward Nicole to shield her. What happened next occurred so fast that later reports would conflict on the exact sequence. The XK3 delegate discharged energy from the staff, not at any human, but toward the delegation from a rival insectoid species. Chaos erupted as delegates scattered. Everyone stay calm, Nicole called out. But her voice was lost in the confusion. Eric assessed the situation in seconds. The council security team, led by Zex Tavrok, had frozen in place, caught between conflicting protocols. The human security team stood back under orders not to engage armed aliens. Eric made a decision. He grabbed a heavy metal serving tray from a nearby table and rushed toward the XK3 delegate. Using the tray as a shield, he deflected another energy blast. In one fluid motion, he slid across the polished floor and used the edge of the tray to knock the staff from the alien's grip. Across the room, Nicole was already moving. Instead of running away from danger, she stepped between feuding alien groups. "This is neutral ground," she declared, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Earth is a place of peace. Lower your weapons immediately." To everyone's surprise, including her own, both alien factions hesitated. Eric used the moment to improvise. He grabbed curtain rods from nearby windows and passed them to his security team. "Form a line," he ordered. "Create space between the groups." The human security team formed a barrier using the curtain rods, physically separating the hostile factions without directly touching any of the aliens. A crucial diplomatic consideration. Throughout the room, other humans responded instinctively. An aide named Philip used a tablecloth to create a smokescreen by throwing it over a decorative flame. Kelly from the translation team flipped a table to create cover for injured delegates. Ben from technical support used a fire extinguisher to create a temporary barrier of foam between fighting aliens. After 15 tense minutes, the situation stabilized. Human security contained the XK3 faction, while Nicole negotiated an immediate resolution. Later that evening, the council representatives gathered in a secure conference room to discuss what had happened. Earth officials had expected accusations and diplomatic fallout. Instead, they found themselves the subject of intense curiosity. "Your security chief disarmed a XK3 warrior with a serving dish," Tavrok stated, sounding almost impressed. "Without weapons of his own." Eric stood at attention. "I used what was available, sir." "And your ambassador walked unarmed between energy weapons," added Fluva, the liquid-filled diplomat. "Either extremely brave or extremely foolish." Nicole smiled diplomatically. "Sometimes there's a fine line between the two." Crovage, the furry security director, growled softly. "Our security team failed today. We were unprepared for the situation." "You were following protocols," Eric offered. "Sometimes situations require improvisation." "Improvisation?" Tavrok repeated the word slowly as if tasting it. "Your species excels at this, using ordinary objects as weapons or shields, adapting instantly to threats." A crystalline being named Shik Till chimed in with a musical voice. "We observed 64 humans during the incident. Not one attempted to take weapons from council members despite opportunities to do so. Instead, they used furniture, fabric, food trays. Humans are taught from childhood to use our surroundings," Nicole explained. "We adapt." "But you still claim to be peaceful," Crovage said accusingly. "Yet we witnessed remarkable combat, efficiency today." Jack Collins, who had watched the entire exchange silently, finally spoke. "Being peaceful isn't the same as being helpless. Humans choose peace even though we're capable of violence. That's what makes it meaningful." The room fell silent as the aliens considered this concept. A species that has options but chooses restraint, Vralnok said thoughtfully. "Fascinating." Before they departed, Tavrok approached Eric privately. "Your actions saved lives today, human. But you have also confirmed what some council members fear." "Which is what?" Eric asked. The reptilian's eyes narrowed. "That humans see everything as a potential weapon. Your entire environment becomes your armory. It makes you unpredictable." Eric considered this. Or adaptable. Depends on your perspective. As the Geneva summit concluded, reports spread throughout council space about the incident. The story changed with each telling. Soon it was said that unarmed humans had subdued armed warriors using nothing but dining implements and furniture. The council's security division began a complete reassessment of human capabilities. And for the first time in council history, a species with no natural weapons or displayed armaments was classified as a potential security concern, not for their aggression, but for their ingenuity. After the Geneva incident, the Galactic Council launched a formal study of human behavior. Dr. Laura Barnes led the human research team working alongside their alien counterparts. At 45, Laura had spent her career studying human psychology and cultural adaptation. Now she found herself explaining humanity to beings from across the galaxy. The research facility occupied an entire level of the council station. Laura walked through sliding doors into a large room filled with screens, strange equipment, and aliens of various species. Some floated, others crawled, a few walked on legs like humans. Dr. Barnes' welcome greeted Vrel Knox, the mantis-like xenobiologist. Today we begin Phase 3 of our study. Laura smiled. What exactly does Phase 3 involve? Practical demonstrations, Vrel Knox explained. The Council wishes to understand human adaptability in controlled settings. Laura followed the alien scientist to a section of the room where several human volunteers waited. She recognized some of them: engineers, soldiers, teachers, and artists who had volunteered to help aliens understand humanity. The first test involved a human engineer named Paul. He stood in an empty room with white walls. A panel opened, and various objects dropped onto the floor: a pen, a book, a piece of cloth, a cup, and several other everyday items. "Please defend yourself," came a voice over the speaker. Paul looked confused. Against what? A small drone flew into the room, beeping as it circled him. It suddenly darted toward him. Paul grabbed the book and swatted the drone from the air. When two more drones appeared, he quickly tore pages from the book, crumpled them, and threw them with surprising accuracy, disrupting the drone's sensors. In the observation room, the alien scientists watched with intense interest.
He transformed the items immediately, noted a gelatinous alien named Bloop. No hesitation. Vrel Knox clicked its mandibles. Observed that he damaged the book, a knowledge storage device, to create projectiles. Most species would consider
this inappropriate. Humans value knowledge, Laura explained, but we value survival more. Paul knew the book's information could be replaced. The tests continued throughout the day. A teacher named Maria solved a complex puzzle using unconventional methods. A former soldier named Greg escaped from a sealed room using only the items in his pockets. An artist named Diane created a tool from seemingly useless parts to reach a high platform. After each demonstration, the alien researchers became more animated in their discussions. Laura noticed they kept returning to one key point: humans didn't follow expected patterns. "Your species should not exist," stated Krovaz bluntly during the review session. The furry security director had joined the research team after the Geneva incident. "You evolved without significant natural defenses on a predator-filled planet. You should have been eliminated through natural selection." Laura raised an eyebrow. "Yet here we are." "Yes," Zexis Tavarok added, "and that is precisely what concerns many council members. You survived through adaptability and tool use to a degree no other species has demonstrated." Laura watched as footage from the tests played on screens around them. "We're not the strongest or fastest. We don't have claws or venom. We had to adapt to survive." "But adaptation has limits," argued a crystalline being. "Species adapt to specific environments, specific threats. Humans adapt to everything." The room fell silent as a new piece of footage began playing. It showed children on a playground. Some climbed structures, others dug in sand, some built towers with blocks only to knock them down and start again. "What are they doing?" asked Vrel Knox. "Playing," Laura replied simply. "Combat training?" Krovaz suggested. Laura shook her head. "Just playing. Learning through experimentation. Human children spend years exploring their environment, testing possibilities, failing, and trying again. Without specific purpose?" Zexit Tavrok seemed puzzled. "The purpose is learning itself," Laura explained. "Childhood play is how we develop our adaptability." That evening, Laura met with Jack Collins and the other human representatives to share her findings. They gathered in a common area designed to approximate an Earth-like environment, with plants and running water. "They're afraid of us," Laura said plainly. "Not because we're aggressive, but because we're unpredictable." Samantha Wright nodded. "I've noticed the same in my language exchanges. They can't understand why our languages evolve so quickly. Most council species have had stable languages for thousands of years." Jack looked troubled. The Security Council is pushing for special protocols regarding humans. They want restrictions on where we can go, what we can access. Because we don't carry weapons? Asked Frank Garcia. Because everything is potentially a weapon to us, Laura clarified. At least from their perspective. Amy Bennett, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. I think we're missing something important here. It's not just that we adapt. It's how we think about adaptation. The council species evolved specialized traits for specific environments. Humans evolved to be generalists. Exactly, Laura agreed. And our greatest adaptation isn't physical, it's social. We survive because we work together, share knowledge, and teach each other. Jack considered this. So how do we help them understand us? We need to show them it's not about weapons, Amy suggested. It's about choices. Humans can turn anything into a tool or a weapon, yes, but we can also choose not to. The next day, Laura presented her findings to the full Council Research Committee. Representatives from 27 species watched as she explained human psychological development. Humans aren't inherently peaceful or violent, she concluded. We're flexible. Our greatest strength isn't our ability to create weapons from our environment, but our ability to choose when not to use them. An elder Fluva, the liquid-filled diplomat, bubbled slowly before speaking. Your young play at destruction and creation equally. Your history contains both remarkable compassion and terrible violence. You walk into rooms full of armed strangers without protection. Your species contains contradictions. Yes, Laura agreed simply. That's what makes us human. The committee debated for hours after her presentation. Some argued that humans represented an unacceptable security risk and should be limited in their council participation. Others saw potential in human adaptability. As Laura left the council chambers, Vral Knox approached her. The committee will deliberate for some time, but I believe we understand humans better now. And what do you understand? Laura asked. The mantis-like alien's compound eyes reflected the station lights. That you are neither the most dangerous species we have encountered nor the most peaceful. You are perhaps the most balanced, capable of both, always choosing between them. Laura smiled. That might be the most accurate description of humanity I've ever heard. 6 months after the Geneva incident, the Galactic Council called for a special session. After long debates about human nature and careful study of human behavior, they had reached a decision about Earth's place in galactic society. Captain William Peters stood nervously outside the Grand Council chambers. At 50, with salt and pepper hair and steady hands, William had been selected to represent Earth's military perspective. Beside him waited diplomat Elizabeth Johnson, a calm woman in her 40s with keen eyes that missed nothing. Ready for this? William asked, adjusting his formal uniform one last time. Elizabeth smiled. As ready as anyone can be. Whatever they've decided, today makes history. A soft chime sounded and the massive doors to the council chambers began to open. William took a deep breath. Like all humans who had come before them, they carried no weapons. The council chamber was a vast circular room with seats for representatives of over 50 species. The walls curved up to form a dome, painted with images of stars and galaxies. In the center stood a platform where speakers could address the entire assembly. Zex Tavrok, now a familiar face to the humans, approached them. The reptilian security chief seemed unusually solemn. The council is ready, Zex Tavrok announced. You will be the first to hear the new protocol. William and Elizabeth followed him into the chamber. They noticed immediately that something was different. The council members were still arriving, filtering in through various doors. But something about them had changed. They're not carrying weapons, Elizabeth whispered in surprise. William looked more carefully. She was right. For the first time since humans had joined galactic society, the council representatives appeared to be unarmed. Some looked distinctly uncomfortable, especially species with natural weapons as part of their biology. A few kept reaching for missing ceremonial items that would normally hang at their sides. The High Counselor, an ancient being that resembled a tall, thin tree with glowing spots along its bark, moved to the central platform. When it spoke, its voice resonated throughout the chamber with a sound like wind through leaves. For 50,000 years, the Galactic Council has maintained one unbroken tradition. The High Counselor began. All species come to these chambers as they are, bearing the protections evolution has granted them. This was our way. The chamber was completely silent. William could feel the weight of history in the room. Humans challenged this tradition, the High Counselor continued. Not through argument or demand, but through example. They walked among us without displayed strength, yet showed remarkable capability when needed. Elizabeth stood straight, projecting calm confidence despite her racing heart. After much consideration, this council has enacted what will henceforth be known as the Human Protocol. The High Counselor raised its branch-like arms. From this day forward, no weapons of any kind will be permitted in council chambers. We shall meet as equals in purpose rather than strength. A murmur swept through the assembled representatives. For some species, this announcement seemed welcome. For others, it clearly caused distress. This is not a simple change, the High Counselor acknowledged. For many of us, our natural weapons are part of our bodies. We cannot remove claws or venom sacs, but we can choose not to display additional armaments. We can choose trust over fear. William watched as members of the council shifted uncomfortably. An insectoid representative clicked its mandibles in what seemed like agitation. A massive being covered in protective plates rumbled something to its neighbor. You may be wondering why we have made this change, the High Counselor said. I invite Viral Knox, head of our xenobiology division, to explain. The mantis-like scientist stepped onto the platform. Its exoskeleton gleamed under the lights, but for the first time, it wore no ceremonial blade. Our research has revealed something remarkable about humans, Viral Knox began. They are neither the strongest species we have encountered, nor the most technologically advanced. Yet they possess something unique, the ability to transform their entire relationship with their environment. Viral Knox displayed images from the human research studies, people using everyday objects in clever ways, children playing and learning, communities working together. Humans did not evolve powerful natural weapons, Viral Knox continued. Instead, they developed the ability to turn anything into a tool or weapon when needed. More importantly, they developed the wisdom to know when not to do so. William listened with growing pride as the alien scientist described human adaptability, creativity, and cooperation as evolutionary advantages. The most profound discovery about humans is not their capacity for violence, but their capacity for choice, Viral Knox concluded. They demonstrate that true security comes not from displaying strength, but from the confidence to be vulnerable in pursuit of greater understanding. After Viral Knox finished, Elizabeth was invited to speak. She walked to the platform with measured steps, feeling the eyes of dozens of alien species upon her. Thank you for this honor, she began. Humans have a saying. Trust must be given to be received. By walking into rooms unarmed, we show our trust in one another. We choose connection over protection. A crystalline being chimed in with a question. But are you not afraid? Without weapons, how do you feel secure? Elizabeth smiled. Security isn't just physical. True security comes from stable relationships, mutual respect, and shared goals. Weapons might protect bodies, but trust protects futures. After the session concluded, Zex Tavrok approached the humans as they prepared to leave. This change has been difficult for many council species, the security chief admitted. Some feel naked without their traditional protections. William nodded in understanding. Change usually is difficult. Yet you humans seem to thrive on change, Zex Tavrok observed. Perhaps that is your true strength. As they departed the council chambers, Elizabeth noticed a small group of younger aliens from various species. Unlike their elders, they seemed excited rather than uncomfortable with the new protocol. One of them, a young Fluva, approached her. Had true humans changed their customs every generation? The young alien asked, liquid body swirling with curiosity. Elizabeth laughed, sometimes even faster. Fascinating. the young Fluva bubbled. Most of our traditions have remained unchanged for thousands of years. There's value in tradition, Elizabeth acknowledged, and value in adaptation. The wisdom lies in knowing which to preserve and which to evolve. As their shuttle prepared to return to Earth, William looked out at the vast council station. What had begun as a cultural misunderstanding about weapons had led to a fundamental shift in galactic diplomacy. "Do you think it will last?" he asked Elizabeth. "This new protocol?" She considered the question carefully. "I think we've shown them another way is possible. Whether they continue, it depends on what they value more, tradition or progress." William smiled. Very diplomatic answer. "I am a diplomat," she reminded him with a smile of her own. Back on Earth, news of the human protocol spread quickly. Humanity had changed a 50,000-year-old tradition not through force or demand, but simply by being different. By being human. The Council's official records were updated with a simple but profound notation. Humans appear unarmed because they have internalized both the capacity for violence and the choice of peace. Their greatest weapon is not what they carry, but what they choose to set aside.